Okay, man, I have a story to tell you today. I think it'll be fun. I'm not an expert on this, but it's something I've been researching a little bit, and I thought it'd be fun to just tell you about a thing that happened. Are you down for that?
I usually like it when you do that.
Okay. I'm not a historian. This is your area, but I'm gonna play ball a little bit with some stuff that I've interacted with. But I want to start like this. What is the biggest spectacle that you've ever participated in? Like, it's clear people got this thing on the schedule to attract a bunch of people to a thing. Can you remember something you've gone to like that?
Like a music festival? Would that count?
I guess.
I've been to some big music festivals. I've been to sporting events and concerts. What do you mean by spectacle?
But I don't know. Like, a spectacle would be an event, like a big thing that's going to happen, and you're like, that's pretty crazy. Are they really going to do that? And then you kind of like hype it up, and everybody gets excited about it, and then everybody shows up to see the thing happen, that kind of thing. I don't know, like a fight after school, that kind of thing.
Ooh. Yeah, well, I've been to a few of those. I don't know if it counts as the biggest ever. I've been in a few of those.
Really?
We would say phrases like, I call you out. You would announce it with that phrase. And that meant we're going to fight after when no teacher can stop us because they're all going home. And then you'd pick a place and you'd meet there and other people would come with and you'd all show up on your BMX bikes and then you would fight. And then
Did you really
you'd
do
go
this?
home after you go home. Yeah, man. I did probably 4 call out and fights. I think I initiated none of them, but apparently I was pretty annoying because I think I got 4 fights through elementary school, middle school, and any in one in high school.
Really?
One really good one in high school. Mm-hmm.
A
Yeah.
really good. Tell me about the good fight. What'd you do?
I was in Ed Copenhafer's shop class, and
yeah.
a kid who turned out to really be a really decent dude who I was friends with later, as is so often the case when you fight a guy. Like, you get the fight out of your system, and you're like, oh, I see why people like you. You're all right. But we were not all right at that point, and dude just picked at me all the time. I don't know what the deal was, because I did not like him or like him. He was fine. I was just trying to get by. And I'm over using the hose, the compressed air hose at the end of shop class to get all the sawdust off of me. And he just comes up behind me and grabs my larynx and yanks.
What?
Why? So I couldn't hear him coming because I'm running that air compressor, that air thing. And it hurt so bad. Then I turned around and he just said the 2 words, you know what they are. Let's go.
What?
Okay. So I was like, well, I've seen this in movies. And so I sort of balled up my fists. I remember somebody telling me, don't clench them, though. You want to stay loose until contact. And I was like, I think you just punch him in the face. So I just punched him right in the face, right in the bridge of the nose. And his glasses broke and it cut his nose a
Yeah, it
little bit.
did.
And I was
Yeah, it
like,
did.
there, I think we're done here. But he wasn't done at all. He made some comment about me getting lucky. And then he just kept coming at me. And everybody gathered around the shop class. And everybody's watching and cheering and yelling and stuff. And Mr. Copenhafer was in some other room not paying attention. And every time he would come toward me, I'd be like, well, that would be a good time to hit him again. So I would just hit him again. Then he'd like shake his head like, dang, I got hit again. But he just kept coming after me. And so I just kept hitting him. And it was comical. This is the way everybody told the story of the legend of that fight in shop class. Was there like he just kept walking at you and you just kept hitting him in the face. It was crazy, man. Like, I've hit a person in the face 20 times in my life, and all 20 were in that fight. Sometimes it takes years for anything to happen. Sometimes a decade happens in a year. It was wild. So I hit him a lot, and then I hit him with a mop handle. Like, we went by the little washing
Dude, what was
station,
this?
and there
Is
was
this
a
like
mop
a
handle.
1980s like ninja fight? I mean, you just like, oh, a mop handle, and then you lean over and get a mop handle, and all of a sudden you start swirling around.
Literally everything you just said, yes, except for the swirling part. The mop was just leaning in a big wash sink, so I grabbed it and pushed it into his face again,
gosh.
And I don't think it hurt him very much. It wasn't a very good move. It was pretty weak. It didn't, like, some of the punches phased him, but that didn't phase him at all.
Did you say something
He
like, let's
kinda
clean
laughed at
this
me.
up, pal?
Oh, that's a good one right
Yeah.
there. Looks like it's time for mop-up duty. No, I didn't think of any of that.
No, okay.
So then he kept coming at me. Now we'd woven through all of the tables, and we're getting down to the very back corner where I don't really have any more backup room to go. And there's this rack of leather dies in the corner next to this steel door. And he's like, he didn't want to be in fist fight mode anymore. He wanted to grapple. So he lowered his shoulder and he ran at me. And I kind of got a little bit out of the way and sort of pushed him into that metal door. In my brain, I like to think I olayed him and staggered him 'cause
matador,
his head
right.
hit the door. I don't think in retrospect it probably did much of anything either, but he didn't get me. He hit the door and then flailed up and hooked himself on that full rack of leather dies. And when he went to yank his arm down, he ripped down the entire rack. And so there's this oily leather dye just all over the ground now. And it's splashing everywhere and it's on our shoes and our pants. And he still wants to fight, but he can't get his footing. And I mean, I can't either. And so he's flopping around and everything. And that's it. That's the end of the fight. But this isn't the point of the story. That's just the most spectacle thing I could think of.
But that wasn't, like, you didn't go to that expecting a spectacle. People, I guess it was a spectacle for other people, but it wasn't like, this time, this place, this is where it's going to happen. Sounds amazing, by the way. That would have been great to be there.
Thanks.
But, like, was there ever a time when there was something that was set up? Like, you knew, oh, this is going to happen. This is going to go down. I got to go see that. Have you ever seen something like that?
You and I went to a full solar eclipse or lunar eclipse.
Yeah.
We saw that whole eclipse in Wyoming. That's probably the most spectacle thing I've ever seen. When you say spectacle, I guess I picture something that isn't going to happen again next year. It isn't like the annual such and such fest. It's a thing that's going to happen once, and you better pay attention.
I'm thinking like the Millennium New Year's Eve thing, like in the year 2000. In the year 2000.
You remember that?
Yeah, Conan
Wow.
used to do that. But I
Yeah.
remember thinking, man, in like at the turn of the millennium, that's going to be a New Year's Eve party that's way different than everything else. I remember thinking that was going to be a big deal.
Yeah,
I remember
Prince thought so too.
Who did?
Prince, remember they were going to
Oh,
party
yeah,
like
yeah.
it's 1999 song?
Absolutely. I just remember thinking that was going to be special, and you kind of want to be there for that. Also, Alabama went to the Final Four, so me and a buddy, we went out there to see that. That was a really important thing for us to see. We're like, we're going to lose, but I want to be there. I just want to be there and see it,
You and I just did a spectacle. We watched the Jake Paul-Mike Tyson fight together. That's never going to happen again.
That's lame. That was lame. We just happened to be at the same location at the same time, and we saw it.
Seriously? That's all that meant to you? I thought it was a really nice time. That's kind of hurtful.
Well, I thought the fight was lame. For months ahead of time, Jake Paul, who is a weird YouTube guy that started doing that, now he just kind of like, what even is that guy? I don't know. I remember meeting him several times and thinking he was very, very strange. I met him at the White House.
I think the fight I described to you from Mr. Copenhaver's class was more interesting than the Paul Tyson fight.
Yeah, probably so. All right, the thing I want to talk to you today about is called the Crash at Crush, which was a spectacle. Like, the whole point of the Crash at Crush was specifically to draw a crowd and get people to talk about a thing. That was it.
Okay.
It was just an event that was created specifically to generate buzz, to make people talk, and it was a pretty dang big deal. So there's this guy way back in the day. His name was William George Crush. He was the passenger agent for this railroad called the Missouri, Kansas, Texas Railroad, which they called the KT Railroad. He had heard about this railroad crash that had happened up in Ohio earlier, and about 20,000 people showed up. So basically, somebody up in Ohio was like, hey, it'd be really cool if we crashed two locomotives head on against each other. That would be awesome. And I think
When was this?
this was in the 1800s.
Okay.
I actually think that he's correct. That is awesome. So in May
Okay.
in May of 1896, it happened. So up in Columbus, okay, the locomotive crash was staged by I'm reading from an article now, Columbus and Hocking Valley Railroad near Lancaster, Ohio. So these people just said, hey, let's just create a huge event where we just bang two locomotives together. I would want to see that. Would you want to see that?
Of course I would want to see that. Yeah, I mean, as long as it's staged. I mean, isn't that why we have the saying, the colloquialism? Like, it's a total train wreck.
Yeah.
It means that it's bad and it's ugly and it's twisted, but you can't look away.
This was the thing that they did in Columbus. And this guy down in Texas heard about it. And he's like, you know what? Sounds great. A train wreck. I should do one of those too. So this guy, William George Crush, he goes to his superiors and he's like, hey, they did this thing. It was very successful. Like 20,000 people showed up. You should let me do it. And somehow he talked his superiors into letting him do this thing. And they totally set it up. So just outside of Waco, Texas, what is now called West Texas, the town of West Texas, the town didn't exist at the time, they set up this huge spectacle. They built a spur off of the railroad line there. They got two old locomotives. The locomotives were number 999 and 1001. They had these special locomotives, and I think it was 6 train cars they put on each one. And imagine like a big valley where you've got like a hill on the far left, like 4 miles away, and a hill on the far right. Maybe the whole track was 4 miles, so maybe it's 2 miles away on each side. And then they have the valley where these trains would run at each other, and then they would meet right in the middle. And so, do you know much about steam locomotives? Do you know much about how they work and how how it actually makes the train go? Have you ever heard much about that?
A little bit, but only because there's an 1880 train that there's a line that used to haul ore in the Black Hills here.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a buddy for a while who his job was to maintain the 1880 steam engine. Like literally his job. He was the steam engine mechanic. And so a couple times I stopped by to see him, and he would try to explain how everything worked, and it was a little overwhelming. It was a huge device. I mean, just the mechanisms were all giant. That's one of the things that stood out to me. But no, I wouldn't be prepared to explain how it runs. So,
well, what is the fuel?
I'd welcome it.
What is the fuel?
I mean, I guess it's just coal or anything that makes steam, right? It's heated water, anything that puts off steam.
Yes. So the way a steam locomotive works is you basically have a firebox, and you create fire in it, and then you've got these tubes that run down through water, and the fire goes through those tubes, or the heat goes through those tubes, and then those pipes heat up the water boils, turns to steam, and then the steam is pressurized, and then it's that pressurized steam that actually moves the pistons that make the engine go. So you can see in your head that little cam on the side of a locomotive. You can see that. You can kind of see that thing happening, right? And so
I can picture the sound that every single kid makes.
Yeah.
That they learned from every single dad who plays a game with every single kid about the train that is their food coming to their chugga, 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 chugga. That's the sound everybody makes for a train, right? And that sound is a steam train.
Yeah, those are valves releasing, is what those sounds are.
Really?
Yeah. And so basically you have this big tank. Imagine a big cylinder. On one side of it, you got a bunch of fire. Like on the end of the cylinder, you have a bunch of fire. You've got these pipes going through the bottom with a bunch of water, and then it's boiling up, making steam. And in the very top of the steam engine, that's where you got a little thing that captures the steam and pushes it down through a pipe all the way down to the pistons. That's how they work. When it comes to pressure inside cylinders, that's a whole thing, man. Like in the early days of mechanical engineering, a lot of what ASME, American Society of Mechanical Engineers, a lot of what they did is made standards for boilers and pressurized tanks and things like that, because it's such a big deal. I remember, it was a long time ago, I used to work at this place in Mississippi. We worked on hydraulic systems. And so you'd go in a room and like the whole wing of a fighter jet would be modeled up. It didn't look like a wing. It looks like pipes, just pipes everywhere. But like the piping representation of a fighter jet wing would be in this room. And so we had hydraulic reservoirs that we would pressurize, and we had fuel pumps that we would pressurize. And for certain systems, the working hydraulic fluid is the jet fuel. It makes the fighter jet lighter weight. And so I remember one of the things I was testing is
Wait. I want to make sure I understand that. You're saying that in some instances within the mechanics of a fighter jet, the hydraulic fluid is the fuel?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
And then that fuel gets used like later on in the flight?
Yeah.
Or is it just happen to be the same material that works and it's in a closed system just for the hydraulics?
Yeah, just think about it. You've got a fuel pump on a fighter jet, and it's really high pressure fuel going to the engine, right? You've already got a very high pressure fluid. Why not just use it to activate pistons and stuff?
Huh.
A lot of military vehicles will just use jet fuel to operate some of the hydraulic systems.
Is there a downside to that? Like a safety downside? It seems like, jet fuel is kind of combustible. If something went wrong, I mean, that you're moving that jet fuel through all of your systems on your aircraft, and that's an aircraft that might be subjected to fire, like being shot at. I mean, it seems like there's some downside to that.
Well, one of the major downsides is the lubricity of the fluid. So hydraulic fluid is typically oily, and you're using it in pistons and stuff, and so it's it has a lot of lubricity to it, and so it can move and seal things really well. Whereas jet fuel is, it's oily, but it's a different kind of oily. It's thinner. It doesn't like to lubricate parts as well, and you end up having a lot more wear. And that's what I worked on. I tested jet fuel lubricity is what I did.
Is there any chance that right now you are rubbing the pad of your thumb across the pad of your index and middle fingers stuck together as you think about the lubricity of an oily substance?
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't, but I am now. Yeah, you're exactly right.
Okay, because I totally am. Like, okay, I can kind of picture how that would move across my fingers. Sure, right, roger that.
So the Crash at Crush involved one of these large pressurized vehicles. It had 2 steam engines, and so that's going to come into play. So basically the way this thing went down is they started selling tickets to go to this thing. So the way they did it is it was a spectacle. There was no admission charged, but they did sell tickets to get on the train to go out to this place. So you could buy a round-trip ticket from anywhere in the state of Texas for $3.50 in 1896, which is about maybe $150 today, something like that. So anywhere in Texas, you pay $150. It was actually $3.50, but you pay a significant amount of money, and then you could just go to this thing.
Sure.
And so they set up this thing, and they called it a temporary city of Crush, after the guy that came up with the whole thing, William Crush. So everybody went out there, like the Ringling Brothers set up tents. There were lemonade stands. I mean, like everybody went. They had to drill temporary wells to have enough water for the people that were there. 40,000 people showed up for this thing, dude.
What?
40,000
That's
people.
madness.
Oh, yeah. So, like, on the day of the event, this was the second largest city in Texas, basically. So it was about the size of the second largest city in Texas at the time. And so there's a ton of people, dude. If you're William Crush, what are you thinking at this point?
As the event is, like, as the people are showing up, you mean?
Yeah. You got 40,000 people.
Oh, I'm thinking this is a wild success. I would assume he negotiated a cut of every concession, every hospitality tent. It's a wild, huge success. I mean, the only concern will be, did he pick a good enough bowl-shaped natural amphitheater that everybody's going to get to see what they came for?
Yeah. He got to thinking about this, and he's like, okay, Now, the thing is, we are actually going to crash 2 locomotives together. And the locomotives are, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we've rigged them so they supposedly will not explode, but they are going to crash together. We have to keep everybody safe. So what distance
Well,
would you say is a good
okay.
distance to keep everybody back from the locomotive crash site? What do you think would be an appropriate distance?
So far, there's so many forces in play and so much chaos that you're intentionally introducing into that moment. Maybe I'm just picturing like steampunk era cartoons and stuff, but when that steam pressure gets to be too high, there's rattling and shaking and shimmying, and then little rivets and bolts start to shake and shoot off like bullets, and they make little ricochet sounds. Admittedly, a little cartoonish, but that has to be based on something, right? So you got two systems that are under massive pressure to get the speed that you want to get, to have the impact that you want to get. And then on top of that, you've got a huge amount of weight and momentum pushing both of behind the locomotives that is built up. Who knows how far that could fire off little shearing pieces of metal. Oh man, I'd go like a quarter mile.
A quarter mile.
I would imagine like how they had people, one spectacle from a similar era was people showing up to watch the Battle of, what was it? Bull
Antietam.
Run. There were a bunch of, the people they brought picnics and they set up shop there to just take in the battle like Xerxes did back in Athens at the Battle of Salamis. And they just didn't really take into account how close they were to the thing. And, it just seems like this is one of those situations where, man, quarter mile minimum. I'm going on and on. Quarter mile minimum. That's my vote.
Yeah. So Crush said, hey, we're going to keep everybody safe here. So we're going to keep everybody at a minimum 200 yards away. You can't come any closer than 200 yards, which to me is like, that's not very far. We're talking about trains hitting each other. Yeah, 200 yards does not sound, but that's for like the general public, right? Obviously, you need the press to be a little closer.
I'm saying what? 300 and change is that's a quarter mile, right? 300 yards and change?
1,760 yards in a mile. So
I'm saying
1,760 divided by 4.
And change.
Yeah, so you're saying 440. Yeah, so yeah, you're about
okay.
double.
So I'm saying more than double what he's saying. All right, cool.
Yep. So that's just the general public, right? So 200 yards for the general public. But obviously, we need 100 yards for the press because the press has to take photos of the event, right? So they said, yeah, we're going to allow members of the press to be within 100 yards of the crash, which is crazy town, dude. That's like straight up crazy town. So anyway, they get everything set up. Now, I have had to do things in the past where I've had a remote control vehicle and I needed the remote control vehicle to be at a very specific place at a very specific time. And I'm here to tell you, that's a hard thing to do. That's a very, very difficult thing to do. So
why is it hard?
Well, it's hard because if it's not a closed loop system, so if you are trying to control, you want to hit a certain place at a certain time. If you're a helicopter pilot, like for example, the 160th, the regiment, the Army guys that are really, really good at flying helicopters, the Night Stalkers. So their saying is plus or minus 30 seconds on target. And they do it, dude. They're good. They're really, really good. So if me and you are in a platoon and we're on the ground and we're about to shoot in a window or something, and we say, hey, dear Night Stalkers, please put a rocket in that window plus or minus 30 seconds. They will do it. It's incredible. But the way they do it is they start coming in on you, and then they can speed up or slow down the helicopter to control it, right? They can be like, oh, okay, well, I'm a little late right now, so I'm going to speed up. Or I'm too early, so I'm just going to do an extra little circle here, right? So they have closed loop control. They can speed up, slow down as they're approaching the target.
Okay.
If you have a vehicle and you're like, I'm going to start the vehicle right here and I'm going to send it over there and it needs to be at that location plus or minus 3 seconds, that's harder to do. And so there's this one thing that the engineers that made this whole spectacle happen, the one thing they did that just blows my mind is the day before the event, they got these 2 steam engines. By the way, these steam engines were 2 35 short ton decommissioned Baldwin engines. I have no idea what that is. Again, $999 and $1,001. So they got these things at each side of the bowl of the valley, and they test ran them. So they would bring the steam up to a certain pressure, and then they would set the steam valve at a certain way, and then they would run it. And they somehow, I don't know how they did it, somehow they timed it so these things would hit perfectly at like a specific spot on the ground. They timed it so well that a dude was able to take a photo of the impact. That's how well they timed it, which is amazing to me that they were able to do that. Hats off to the engineers that did this, but somehow they got everything set. So apparently these steam engines were pretty dialed. What does your buddy do with the steam engine? Does he actually run it up and down the track?
Maybe some. Yeah, well, no, definitely some. He engineered several of those little runs. It goes between Hill City and Keystone. You've been to both of them. They're little quaint, touristy towns. And it wends and winds through.
Have you ever ridden on it?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, I have.
What was it like?
Yeah, it's lovely. They do a little Christmas ride, and all of the staff dress up in little Christmas clothes, and they bring you hot chocolate and peppermint sticks and things like that, and they sing Christmas songs. It's pretty magical.
That's awesome. So these guys did this, and it was amazing. So the following day, they got everything set up. About 5 o'clock, they got all of the train. They got both of the trains set up, and they brought them straight to the center, like right where they were going to hit. And they were like, "All right, this is what it looks like." And they were like, "This is where we're going to do it." And so they brought them, kind of like boxers that come up before they fight, and they like touch gloves or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They did that with the locomotives, and then they backed everything up. And then it took a long time to get everybody in position because of what you said. Today, if we were to do this today, how would you control the crowd? Like, how would you get people to where they needed to be?
I don't know the answer to that. I think this would be a very difficult event to pull off today because everybody's going to have a cell phone. A whole bunch of influencers are going to be there because it's a place to be, and they're all going to want a better position, and that's just going to cause this drift toward the impact point the whole time.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to need physical boundaries that are impenetrable to keep people from influencing too close to the impact site.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it.
You'd have to do those barricades that they do, like during parades or whatever, the big metal barricades. You'd have to do something like that. They had grandstands set up. They had all this stuff. Anyway, the time comes for the event. The engineers on each side, they get the locomotives up to temperature. They get the steam pressure up, and then they set the steam for whatever pressure it's supposed to be, feeding the pistons or whatever. And then they stayed on the trains for 4 revolutions of the drive wheel on each side. So they're on it, they get the thing going around and around. They do 4 full wheel rotations, and then they just hop off. So they hop off, and they're like, well, there it goes. Can you imagine what that felt like? So
the die has been cast.
How do you say that
We're
in Latin?
committed now.
I
don't remember.
Ella est or something like that. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, you're right there. You sure?
So they let it go, and everybody's sitting down. And there's actually an account from the Dallas Morning News. No, not Morning News. Yeah, the Dallas Morning News, September 16th, 1896. The event happened on September 15th, 1896. So let me read you an account of what happened in the next day in the Dallas Morning News. It says, "The rumble of the 2 trains, faint and far off at first, but growing nearer and more distinct with each fleeting second, was like the gathering force of a cyclone. Nearer and nearer they came, the whistles of each blowing repeatedly, and the torpedoes which had been placed on the track exploding in almost a continuous round like the rattle of musketry. They rolled down at a frightful rate of speed within a quarter mile of each other, nearer and nearer as they approached. The fatal meeting place, the rumbling increased. The roaring grew louder." I haven't been able to find anything about the torpedoes, but apparently they placed explodey things on the tracks or something.
Well, to me, that just sounded like a metaphor for the trains.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think they actually meant torpedoes. I think that's just the flourishes of late 19th century reporting.
I don't know. It says, nearer and nearer they came, the whistles of each blowing repeatedly, and the torpedoes which had been placed on the track exploding in almost a continuous round like the rattle of musketry. Sounds like explosions to me. I don't know.
No.
Could be wrong.
So were they blowing up the track behind them then? Because, I mean, you can't blow up the track in front of you.
I don't know. Maybe they
I
just
think-
had
I think-
spotting charges or something.
I think it's simile. I think they're likening the train to torpedoes. That's my guess.
I don't know. I'm going for actual explosions because it's a spectacle. I think.
Okay. I like that better.
Yeah, I would have. I've never watched the movie Tropic Thunder, but I really want to. But
I have.
there's this moment, I've only seen it, where these fighter jets come in and there's big explosions are happening. To me, it's like that. Don't ruin that movie for me.
You're right. That's exactly what I was picturing.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna. I didn't. You brought it up. I didn't do. I'm just sitting here.
I know, but I
No,
know
I
you
won't
want to
ruin it for
spoil it
you.
because of the way you laughed.
You're right.
Okay.
You're right. Okay. I'm just gonna sit here. Nothing.
All right, so you're in the crowd. What do you think that was like?
Well, I bet there were a lot of women in corsets, and I bet they were fanning themselves. It's September. It's still summer. It's Texas.
Yeah.
So I bet there was a lot of that. I bet there had been a band there, a brass band that had been playing some John Philip Sousa marches.
Mm.
I bet there was a lot of American flag bunting, like opening day in a Major League Baseball stadium,
Mm.
all around the grandstands and whatnot.
Yeah.
I bet there was some sort of grand marshal who was very rotund and had a monocle and a pocket watch
Yeah.
to make sure things were right, and a President Taft walrus mustache. That would be my guess.
Yeah.
And I would guess that he placed both hands on his belly while he enthralled the crowd with instructions about how things were going to be.
Yeah. It was horrible. Like, the thing was, they did not expect the boilers to explode, but they did. They planned this thing. So they're like, oh yeah, we've got all these safety mechanisms put in the locomotives here so the boilers won't explode. But that's exactly what happened.
Of course they did.
Yeah. So I read an article from a guy that researched this back in the day, and he had found a bunch of eyewitnesses, or a couple of eyewitnesses. And one of the eyewitnesses in the 50s, like the 1950s, who had seen the thing, said this: there was a swift instance of silence, and then, as if controlled by a single impulse, both boilers exploded simultaneously. The air was filled with flying missiles of iron and steel, varying in size from a postage stamp to half a driving wheel. So, right? So you go, you're like drinking a lemonade, you're listening to the band, you're really excited. Okay, we're at the Crash at Crush. This is going to be amazing. And all of a sudden these things hit and all hell breaks loose. What's really interesting is there was a photographer. His name was Jervis Dean. He was set up like right at the crash site. He was about 100 yards away, and the photograph exists, dude. Like, you can see this photograph. It's the exact moment that they hit, and you can see the motion blur on the image because of how fast they're moving. It's incredible. The guy was so close when the thing went off. The boilers exploded. He lost an eye. Like, a bolt flew off of this thing, hit him straight in the eye, blinded him.
The photographer?
Yes. Yeah. 2 people died.
Of course they did.
Yeah, they just died. So,
From shock, or did they get hit with something?
shrapnel. They got killed. Like, people paid for the spectacle, and boy, did they get it. It was a really big deal, man. It was bad. So Dean, or Deanie, whatever his name was, he was in a coma for months. That's how those photos got taken. That's crazy.
That is crazy. Who took the photos after the explosion, though? Because they collided, and you're showing me pictures here from Mr. Dean's photo studio of people gathered around the wreckage. That's after the explosion. He was in a coma. How did that happen?
I don't know, dude. If the photographer was in a coma, that means somebody had to, like, think about it. You click the shutter on a camera. That means that somebody has to go get the film out, and they have to know how to use the camera, and they have to then get it developed. But if he was in a coma, then how did that happen? He must have had, like, assistants or something, right?
I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. Can you Google search there and see if you can come up with, like, I don't know. Did he have a studio or something? How did this happen?
Hang on a second. I'm getting a computer. Just give me a second. Okay. All right, computer. Oh, now this is interesting. The computer says that there's actually an old wax cylinder recording made by people who were there at the site and actually were witness to the incident that put Mr. Dean in a coma and cost him his eye.
Get out of town. Are you serious?
I'm hoping someone's converted this to MP3. Let me see if the computer...
It's a lot of typing to play an MP3.
Yeah, there's an MP3 of this old wax cylinder recording. It's available here on the internet. I've got it.
Do you still
I've got it
Winamp?
loaded up. I absolutely have it. It's queued up on my Winamp. Would you like to hear it?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I would love that.
Hang on. Let me just click play. There we go.
I say, dear Barnacles, what a spectacle indeed.
Well, now I do declare, this may be the most spectacular I have ever set eyes upon.
Well, Barnacles, how did you raise your funds to pay for the $3.50 ticket to come all the way from Waco with me? How did you do that?
Well, a traveling medical researcher offered me $3.50 if I would allow him to articulate the skeleton of my dearly beloved wife, Amelia, and I said yes.
Oh, that is amazing, Barnacles. Well,
And you?
Well, me? Well, it's very simple. I decided to contact this photographer. You see him over there, just the man in the tall hat, Mr. Deany. This is Joe Deany. Jarvis Deany. He's the photographer.
This is the gentleman in the tall hat. Yes, the one with the striking eyes.
Yes, that's him. So he is a photographer in Waco, and I simply went in, volunteered my services as an assistant, and I said, Mr. Deany, I assume his name is Deany, D-E-A-N-E. Mr. Deany, I happen to be skilled in the art of photography. I can assist you at the Crash at Crush. And of course, I mean, could you say no to such an offer? He set up cameras.
I do declare he was willing to pay you $3.50 for just 4 days of travel and 12 hours of back-breaking labor? That's a remarkable deal for you.
I know, it is. I was excited to do such a thing. And if you look, actually, my dear Barnacles, we could use your help. So we have strategically positioned cameras all along the track. Oh, do you see in the distance? I do believe the engineers are firing up the engines. Do you see this?
How could I not? What are we here to see? The steam rises like the plume before the eve of battle at the far ends of this sacred site, where these two steel menaces will be pitted against each other in material combat.
Well, absolutely. So what I'm going to need you to do, fair Barnacles, is you see the camera to your left, over there. You see that? I have been given the responsibility of this camera here, and Mr. Deany is on the platform over there. We're all going to synchronize our shutter clicks at the correct time, and we will be taking the photos, and I can't wait to see what comes out afterwards. Oh, getting closer.
And how do you propose we synchronize our shutter clicks?
Well, I believe, if I read Mr. Crush's pamphlet correctly, that they have outlined some torpedoes along the tracks, and so as it comes down, they're getting very close, Barnacles. Here's the shutter. When the torpedo explodes, if you will just click it, and we'll just go from there. Does that work?
Well, I do declare the crowding is getting too significant for me to properly reckon the point of impact. I think we should consider pushing our way forward past these barriers.
Let's do so. Whoa, well, the policemen here are now pushing everyone back to the safe distance of 200 yards. Don't mind him, officer. He's with the media. He's here with me and Mr. Dina. Dini? I don't know how to say his name.
The E is silent.
How do you say it then?
Mr. Dean.
Do we call him Jarvis or Joe?
I do declare it is Mr. Dean, a man of esteem and respect.
Okay, here we go. As these locomotives get closer, Barnacles, do you have any idea on how they are going to collide? I read Mr. Crush's pamphlet, but what do you recall it says in the pamphlet about what we expect to see?
There is no mystery of science to be observed here, clearly and obviously. Two vehicles traveling at such a rate of speed will collide together and push up in the middle, forming an inverted V. I don't understand why you would even ask.
Sir, my heart is pounding. They are getting closer. Do you feel it?
I'm overwhelmed with anticipation, such that I am clicking this pen in my right hand, anticipating the firing of the shutter at the decisive moment.
Mr. Dean has given us the signal, and here we go! Shutter!
A magnificent explosion. Better than I had anticipated. Clearly we are far enough, but we may not be far. Those are getting much closer. That's incredibly hot!
Mr. Dean has been smitten in the eye!
Those gorgeous eyes!
Women and children running everywhere!
Perhaps I could remove my cummerbund to impede the bleeding from his orifices.
Rapid tourniquet around the photographer's
so
head!
much blood. But history, I do declare, continues to unfold before our very eyes. No disrespect. Someone should be taking these photographs.
I must tend to the photographer. I will leave the photos in your trustworthy hands.
My tailed tuxedo is literally on fire, but my hands are occupied holding in what remains of the eyeball material of dear Mr. Dean.
Be still, Mr. Dean. Be still.
Sweet photographer, wizard, prince, I am here for you.
Do we have a priest?
The material coming from Mr. Dean's eye is increasingly viscous in nature. I am unable to assist with these photographs, but the bystanders are beginning to compile themselves comportedly upon the comportion of the collision. This must be documented, my dear friend.
I will assist Mr. Dean in retreating to a safe place. You handle the rest of the photographs today, my friend Barnacles.
You can count on me. These will be preserved and cherished for generations to come.
Oh, one additional note as I retreat with our fair photographer. I note that the trains did not rise in the center as expected. It seemed to have telescoped.
Impossible. Like the device invented by the great late modern genius Galileo.
Why did you pick Foghorn Leghorn? I apologize. I forgot to tell you about the ragtime composer, Scott Joplin, whom you know. You know who this person is?
Scott Joplin is the ragtime composer. I would argue the two greatest ragtime composers of all time are Scott Joplin. Everyone knows a song by Scott Joplin, whether they know this or not. And whoever wrote the music to the first three Super Mario Brothers. Those are the most famous ragtime composers of all time.
So the Mario Brothers theme is ragtime?
Yeah,
you're right. And Scott Joplin, what did he do?
He did The Entertainer. The one everybody learns to play on the piano. Their second
Really?
year of piano. Yeah, it's in every little piano trainer compendium. It's The Entertainer. Yeah, Ragtime. It was real fun. It was real peppy. It was a lovely movement in music. But you're telling me, you're saying he wrote a song about it, or you're saying Scott Joplin was actually there?
Well, according to the article, didn't you just read it that it says he was probably there? Is that right?
No, I quit reading it because we were switching gears. So I was trying to figure out how to do that stupid Foghorn Leghorn accent. I got distracted. Okay, what are we doing here? I don't know if he was there. I just pulled up.
Here, I got it right here. ThePhotographerOnline.com. This article is written by, oh man, why is the person's name not on the article? I don't know. Okay, anyway, it says Scott Joplin. Dadgummit, 1 second. Joplin. There you go. In the years to follow, ragtime composer Scott Joplin, who may have actually witnessed the event, wrote The Great Crush Collision March, which included instructions in the score for replicating the sounds of the collision through playing techniques, special notes, and the use of dynamics. Yeah.
That's called program music. That was popular at that time. People doing
program music?
Yeah, as a type of music where it structurally sounds like what it's about. I think the example they give in music school all the time for program music is a piece called The Syncopated Clock from around this era. And it's the song that the Jeopardy theme is based on, The Syncopated Clock. I think they sound a lot alike. But it has like the ticking of a clock in it. And it's a piece of music that evokes what it's about by having like the sounds of it in there. Like musical onomatopoeia almost. Is this it?
Oh, yeah. Here we go. Here, I got it. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and my understanding is that it speeds up. So let me move forward here toward the crash. It says here on the sheet music, the noise of the trains while running at a rate of 60 miles per hour, whistling for the crossing. That was the collision. That dong says whistle before collision.
Did you hear how the two chords, the registers of the two chords were different for the two final whistle toots from each train? The 999 and the 1001. Boop, boop, boop. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Yeah, that was clever. And when you hear that and you picture the scene, can you keep your brain from going to a black and white silent film where it's cutting between shots of people moving at unbelievably quickly, quick rates of speed, moving around and overacting, and then it cuts to a title card and it's like, the trains are getting closer, what shall we do? And it cuts back to the lady slapping both hands against her cheeks, looking deeply concerned. Doesn't it just feel like an old-timey silent film soundtrack?
It absolutely does. To me, I go to an old saloon and a piano that plays with a card with holes punched in it. That's what's happening in my head.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this Scott Joplin connection is really interesting. He was at the 1893 Chicago World Columbian Exposition. I did not know that. He put together a band and played there at the World Fair. That's awesome.
Really?
Uh-huh. And then it looks like he was in Texas for a time, and probably, according to some of the things I'm poking around at, was an eyewitness to this thing. How great is that?
Okay, I just Googled how much does a new locomotive cost. It's $3 million. How much would it cost to replicate this event today? Because you could do it for way cheaper than that, right?
$3 million for a brand new locomotive? That's it?
Yeah,
right now.
That'd be more than that.
I mean, don't get me wrong. $3 million is more money than I'll ever sniff in my entire life. It's a lot of money, but I thought it'd be, yeah, I guess I just thought it would be more. Well, how much is it for a used locomotive? Let's just go try to buy one real quick. You got them on an eBay or something? Buy a used locomotive. I'm Googling this.
Dude, this would be a great Notum Questions meetup. It's just we just make a little section of track.
Crap.
Dude, this has been tried. Crap, dude, you can just buy locomotives.
No,
they're for sale on the internet. Yes.
Where?
At sterlingrailinc.com. You can buy all kinds of different cars if you want them. Yeah, this one's in great condition.
Buy
It's a
and sell
1961.
locomotives?
Yes.
Shut up, dude. There's 100 for sale.
Give me a number, you cowards. Don't give me this call us for. Tell me how much it is. What is the number one thing everyone wants to know?
We're going to need more patrons, man. Yeah, different Patreon tiers. Like if you're at a certain level, like where you get to stand at the 100-yard distance from the crash.
It should be the other way. Oh, give us safety goggles.
It should be the other way.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Gosh. Oh my
Dude,
goodness.
you're right. They're for sale.
Yeah, you can buy these. Sterling Rail used railway. You can buy a railroad look $69,000. I found one for $69,000. I don't have that kind of money right now.
What?
Yeah.
Okay, I found one for $300,000. What year is it? How many horsepower is the one you looked up?
Hang on, let me go back to it. I was trying to find a cheaper one because I don't have 69,000 right now.
No, I don't either. This
You
is
can call 'em,
SW
man.
1500 4-axle EMD. It's a 1500 horsepower. It's an 80-volt system, 325,000. Make an offer, dude.
I found a cheaper one. I'm down into the 50s now. I found a 59,000. But some of these you can lease. You can lease or rent a SW14 locomotive. Just take out insurance. Surely they got to have some kind of rental insurance for a locomotive. Yeah, probably technically and not technically and in every way illegal. But they did it on Jackass. Johnny Knoxville rented a car and just trashed it, and he took out insurance. And it worked out totally fine. I think he went to jail in Canada for that, actually. Okay, we're not
Did
going to
he
do
really?
that. We'd have... Somebody did, didn't they? Maybe it was
I don't know.
Bam Mar. I never know how to say his last name. Okay. What's the horsepower on this? 1,200
Dude,
horsepower.
this is an amazing website. This is Sterling Rail Inc. This is incredible, dude.
You could just buy a railroad, like in Monopoly, but then you actually have one.
What happens if you have a locomotive? Do you have to pay like Norfolk Southern to run on their rails, or how? Or who owns the rails?
Surely you do. I think the rail lines own the rails, don't they?
I guess.
Yeah, it's got to be what it is. And where do you keep one? Is there a private railroad locomotive garage? I just don't know what you even do with one of these things. This would be one of the worst gifts I could receive. Would be a locomotive. I just can't care for it right now. I'm not in a position to care for it. But dang, you can buy these.
Did I tell you? I'm aware of the maglev train in Germany. So Deutsche Bahn, they had a test track. It was a magnetic levitation train in Germany. It was outside of Emsland, which is an area of Germany I used to go to a lot for work. And we went out there one day and we just looked at it. We got to see the operations center and everything. And it was like I forget, tens of kilometers track in a straight line, and then there was like a loop on one end, and there was a loop on the other end. Well, unfortunately, somehow they had a train car, like a service car, that was on the track. They were doing testing, and they hit it. It was basically this. It was basically the Crash at Crush, except it was, let's see, maglev train Germany accident. There it is. The Lathen train collision on 22 September 2006. A maglev train collided with a maintenance vehicle near Lathen, Germany, killing 23 people. So what's interesting about this is I actually went to this maglev track before this happened. They call it the day the future died, the 2006 maglev accident. I have video that I recorded on a really, really, really old Fuji FinePix camera, like 640 by 480 kind of resolution, of this maglev track running down the rail. And it was really amazing. But apparently when this happened, and I'm looking at pictures right here, when this happened, it telescoped. It basically politically lost steam. I mean, people were not happy with it after this.
There were
it was
a
a big
lot of
disaster.
levels of pun in what you just said.
There was with the steam, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that was intentional, but there's a lot going on there. Okay, I'm looking at the thing.
You looking at the article?
So you're saying the whole concept lost momentum
yeah.
of the maglev train? Okay, when you say maglev train, you mean it doesn't touch anything; it's frictionless.
Yeah. So, do you know what a motor is, and you know how a motor works?
Yes, I'm familiar with those things.
Do you know what a linear motor is?
I do not.
So a linear motor is really cool. Basically, if you think about how a motor works, you got the rotor and the stator. If you just kind of like flip it around and stretch out the thing instead of rotating it around, you just have like a bunch of coils going down the track. And if you have a magnetic field in the presence of aluminum and you charge that field at a certain rate, they will repel each other because of something called Lenz's law.
Okay, sure.
Long story short, you can get a force when you're moving a magnetic field in the presence of a conductor. Yeah, so I've got a little thing here in the garage. It's an aluminum disc, and if you spin the aluminum disc fast enough, you can get a permanent magnet to float on it. It's really cool.
That's real cool.
I don't know how they do the maglev train exactly, but that's what they did. But it really sucks
This
that there was an
accident
accident.
is awful.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not just an accident. It is a calamity. This wasn't a real big town that this happened at. Everybody would have known somebody. This is an awful tragedy. My goodness.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like it was inherently the fault of the technology, though, right? I mean, the blame was quickly placed on the two dispatchers. Both were arrested the day after the accident. Seems like it was human error that could have just as easily happened with any kind of train.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't know much about it. I mean, obviously, I've been glancing at it for a whole whopping 1 minute. What do I know?
They destroyed it. The whole concept. But they still have maglevs. Like, there are maglevs in the world. But have you ever ridden the trains in Germany?
Maybe twice. Just a couple of day
They're
trips
awesome.
around there.
Completely awesome. I'm really, really excited. I'm actually going to ride a train in 2 days.
Really? Where at?
I'm going to go from D.C. to New York. I've got to go to D.C. for something, and then I'm going to go to New York. I'm doing a meeting before the inauguration, and
okay.
And I'm going to wake up on inauguration day, and I'm going to take a train to New York City.
A YouTube thing?
Yeah.
Cool.
But I'm excited about taking a train in America, and I'm also a little sad about it already because I've ridden on trains in Germany. So
yeah, we trained around Italy a bunch with the kids a year ago for a big magical family Christmas trip, and it was great. The smooth sailing was real easy.
The Katy Railroad, they had all these lawsuits from these victims, right? If you're in charge of a railroad, what do? You give people free rides for life, right? So
I guess. So they can remember that every time they ride?
I guess. I don't know. This was a thing, man. It was a big deal. They had to settle all these big settlements. The photographer that lost the eye, they gave him $10,000, which was, like $400,000 or something like that. In today's money, it says $350,000 in 2023 dollars, which, factor in inflation, whatever, it's a lot. Ultimately, it became this thing of legend, and there's actually a historical marker today outside Texas, and you can read about this thing. If people had died, would this have been a success? What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the only thing that went wrong.
Yeah.
But, okay. How many people die at Burning Man every year? Do we know that? I mean, there's no way you're putting on Burning Man and you're coming out unscathed, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, Burning Man is a spectacle. You're absolutely right. It is, isn't it?
Yeah, so just let's run the ratio on it. I think people consider that to be successful most of the time. I mean, was it last year that they all got mudded in or whatever and it turned into some sort of toxic hellscape or something? Maybe that was a couple years ago. I don't know. But generally speaking, on a good year at Burning Man, I have to figure more than 2 people die every time.
Looks like around
Right?
75,000 people go to Burning Man-ish. That's a lot.
So double the crash that we're talking about.
Yeah, double the crash.
Real close to roughly double. So what's the number? You got something there? Can you search that?
How many people die at Burning Man?
Yeah, I'm not trying to make light of it. You know, that's very, very sad, but we're trying to be a little clinical about this and figure out what constitutes a success.
7 people have died since 1990. A woman died on the first day in 2024. 2023, a guy died. That might have been the guy that, I don't know. A lot of people die from drug overdose. Looks like a woman got hit by a bus one year. Somebody fell under a trailer. I mean, I got to say, for a bunch of drug-headed hippies, it sounds like Burning Man's pretty safe compared to what I would
Okay, I'm going to level with you. I'm astonished the number is that low.
I am too, man.
What?
I know.
7?
Yeah.
That's like one every 4 years since its inception.
It's pretty good.
That's a phenomenally good death rate.
Yeah.
I think you could maybe call that worth it. How many people died at Woodstock 1999 or whichever one it was when the Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers was out there buck naked and then everybody turned savage and they
3.
pushed over all the contents? It was 3?
3 people died and hundreds were treated for heat stroke and dehydration. Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
That's
that's getting
so
more
that's pretty
toward the
good.
ratio. So this is a pretty bad ratio.
Yeah. So this is pretty bad. But I mean, it's 1800s. They had to drill wells. I mean, at least they had the dehydration thing covered. They drilled wells.
Yeah. Okay, I'll give them that.
Let me read you the historical marker that's placed just outside of Waco. The Texas Historical Commission placed the following marker. A head-on collision between 2 locomotives was staged on September 15, 1896 as a publicity stunt for the Missouri, Kansas, and Texas Railroad. Over 30,000 spectators gathered at the crash site named Crush for market passenger agent William G. Crush, who conceived the idea. About 4 p.m., the trains were sent speeding towards each other. Contrary to mechanics' predictions, the steam boilers exploded on impact, propelling pieces of metal into the crowd. 2 persons were killed and many others injured, including Jarvis Dean of Waco, who was photographing the event. Now, it says they took off at 4 o'clock, which contradicts something I read. So I guess we don't really know, or I don't really know the exact time that the locomotives headed towards each other. But it sounds pretty fantastic. And my ultimate question here is, if this were to happen today, would you go?
Dude, I don't know. Like, I was the guy for the longest time who was opposed to UFC fighting. I'm like, no, it's too gladiatorial. We don't want to go back to that. It's too savage. You don't just go watch that for the spectacle. But there was a UFC fight on the other day while I was just out for dinner with some friends at Buffalo Wild Wings. And brother, boy, did I keep watching, because they just go in there and beat on each other. How can you not look at that? They're just punching each other in the face and kicking each other in the leg, and they're choking each other and stuff. You just don't see it every day. And I guess that's the whole nature of spectacle, right? Is it's weird. It's memorable no matter what happens, because, I mean, an interesting day is one where something happens that doesn't happen every day. You remember forever. I don't know. I think I would have acted all aloof and like I was better than it, but I would have invented some narrative to save face that would allow me to be there. And I secretly probably would have really enjoyed seeing the thing smash together, I think. Would you have gone?
I would have been all in, man. I would have been one of the engineers setting the trains up. I would have been like, Roy.
Blood on your hands, Sandlin.
Yeah, I was like, Roy, we have got to get a better metering valve for our steam here, man. We got to get this to within like 10 feet. And they did a great job, man. Go look at that photo that was taken at the crash site. It is absolutely incredible. Like they are steaming. You can see like the billowing smoke coming out of the locomotives. They hit at only about 45 miles an hour each. So I guess the relative velocity of the two was 90 miles an hour. But everybody just swore it was way faster than that. It must have felt crazy.
Yeah, but I mean, how many newtons, how many joules are we talking about here? That's an unbelievable amount of force being exerted.
Yeah, I mean, that's a knowable thing. If you were to calculate the kinetic energy of that, it'd be huge, like an incredible bomb. And the thing about steam boilers that's very interesting is the steam itself really wants to expand. So when I used to do that testing on those hydraulic reservoirs, we would just pump them full of water and pressurize the water. But we were very careful not to put air in there because the air would compress, and when it released, it's a violent ripping apart. And so the fact that these steam boilers exploded was a huge deal.
Okay, I have a question for you, though, real quick before we go further, because you, of all the people I know, have probably smashed the most things together. I wonder, as I picture this, I can see 3 ways this could go down when they actually hit each other. Way number 1 would be that they would hit, and the nose of both locomotives would go up in the air, and then the wheels would smash together. Way number 2 would be that they would both dig in at the point of impact. The nose of both would go down, and the back end would come up, and then the weight of the cars behind would push through the locomotives, and the cars behind would actually collide. And then way number 3 would be like an accordion. They would just mush together and crumple up like that. Or I guess way number 4 would be one just happens to get leverage on the other and goes under, or the other gets leverage underneath and the other goes over. Do you know how they actually crashed?
Yeah, it's called telescoping. And so the way it's a rail, I guess, impact term. Rail impact is actually a whole field of study. So when you have military equipment that's going to be shipped, logistically, you have to do what's called a rail impact test. You strap it down to a rail car, and then you hit that rail car with another rail car. It's a dynamic event that, in fact, where I worked, we did that. But there's a specific type of wreck when you have a destructive rail impact. It's called telescoping. And so a telescoping collision is when one of the rail cars will run up over the other one and just kind of telescope into the train. And so like it just kind of goes, it's like a snake eating a snake kind of thing. And it's actually one of the most dangerous ways for rail cars to impact if there's passengers on board. And so there's a mechanism that most modern locomotives have. It's this bar on the front. It's a, let me see, anti-telescoping device. What's that called? There's I don't know. There's a word for it. But anyway, there's this device that they put on the front. It's basically just like a big bumper they put on the front of trains. And the point of it is so that one train won't ride up on top of the other one and just scrape off the cars. But that's kind of what happened. They did that. But when the boilers exploded, it flattened everything down. Like you would think they would rear up like 2 elephants fighting or whatever.
Yeah.
But they said that the impact just looked like flat, like kapam, it just blew down. And that makes sense to me because the steam in a boiler is up top. And if that exploded, it would kind of peel down the sides, like cutting a Coke can longitudinally and like peeling it off. They said it looked flat. The rear cars on each one were unscathed, but they said the locomotives and the front cars were just destroyed, and people just walked all over the field and just tried to find pieces and keepsakes and stuff like that. One of the guys that was interviewed in the 50s...
While there were bodies?
I mean, only 2 people died, man. So, but yeah, absolutely.
That's so many.
You can.
Oh my goodness.
You can see pictures of like the crowd standing at the crash site. They took a picture afterwards too.
Oh, I found it. Oh my goodness. Look at that thing. That is a twisted heap of wrecked metal. And just as people were prone to do back then, they just all stacked up on top of it. It was the selfie of the 1880s. Now anything happens, we hold a phone at arm's length and pose at it. Back then, I'm convinced if anything happened, people were like, let's all stand on top of it in a giant human pyramid and hold real still and look at the camera. Because there it is. That's what they did.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was amazing.
They all look so dapper. No sweatpants. Man.
The eyewitness guy from the 1950s, he said that they tried to lynch William Crush, because they were so mad that the people died.
What?
They tried to lynch him. I don't know if that actually happened. This is just what this eyewitness guy said. And they said he escaped on horseback. So he got out of there. The railroad company fired him, but then hired him back the next day. So they hired him back the next day, and he ended up retiring from the railroad. But that's the Crash at Crush, a crazy spectacle that I thought you would enjoy learning about.
You thought right. I had no idea. Never heard of anything about this. And I was in suspense the whole time. I didn't even know if they would actually crash, even though it was in the name.
Yeah.
This was really, really fun. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Interestingly, I think this is the way that most videos on the internet are going. People are trying to do the most spectacular spectacle they can imagine. And I think people just don't really care anymore. I think people are kind of getting over it. They're like, whatever. I mean, what are you going to do? A nuclear bomb versus a nuclear bomb? What would it take to make people excited today? And that's something to think about. But spectacles have always been interesting. I think that's why the Colosseum and gladiators, that's a thing. It says something about the human heart. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, click economy is not a new thing. We just didn't call it clicks back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the place to run off to if we wanted to talk for another hour here, and I know we can't because you got things to do, is spectacle on the internet. I mean, my brain goes right to the guy who just jumped out of a running plane.
Yep.
For some stupid clicks on YouTube and a few bucks in ad revenue. That's idiotic.
Yes.
Just idiotic. We talked about Logan Paul, some of the stuff that he and his brother did early on in their careers. I mean, yikes. These are things with actual consequences.
There was a YouTuber that made a video of running a train into a hole, but the interesting thing about that is basically the whole thing was CGI. It says
Really?
Yeah.
I remember that video. I didn't watch it on principle.
Yeah, it's pretty dumb.
I sure showed them.
Anyway,
my view.
That was the Crash at Crush, man. Thanks for this. I hope you enjoyed it.
It was great. I did. Thanks, buddy.
World Congress. uvumelelana